Yeah, and this will go into the bank of other indie accelerator um, discussions and chats that we have up on YouTube, Jordan. So just
Yeah.
letting you know. Okay. Um, let me know
Like
when we're good to go,
like
Anurag.
read off your social security numbers or
Yeah, just
other credit card numbers.
Yeah, we are live already.
all right, cool.
Perfect.
Um, well, first of all, thank you, Jordan, for joining us today at Indie Accelerator. We've just to set up Indie Accelerator quickly. The accelerator part is very tongue-in-cheek. It is meant as a very slow muddling through of a bunch of new indies as we get our feet into the indie lifestyle, into the game. Uh, we've been doing this for a few months now, through which we've read many blog posts, and currently we are slow reading the Art of Gig book, starting with chapter 1, and that's been pretty fun, and we're gonna continue doing that. Once in a while, when we're lucky, we get guest speakers such as Jordan, who has been a longtime indie contributor to Ribbon Farm, lots of great articles there, as well as a newly published author, I hear. So maybe you can talk a little bit more about that. And yeah, so over to you, Jordan. I believe the first thing you wanted us to do is kind of go through a round of intros, but I'll let you kick it off.
Yeah. I think go ahead and let's have everyone just introduce themselves and where you're working, either in terms of industry or jurisdiction, and like what percentage of what you're making in terms of income or in terms of time spent is what you would call like your indie work, and then I'll finish that up. So go ahead and do maybe in name order in the chat there.
Anurag, are you listen only or are you gonna?
No, I can talk.
Okay, go
Yeah.
for it.
So I'm basically a firmware engineer by profession. So I've been doing this for around 15 years now. And so right now I work as a contractor mainly. And so yeah, it's like kind of indie, but not completely indie. So it's somewhere in between. So I work primarily with so with Nokia right now. So Nokia is my like I'm contracting with Nokia, and then like yeah. So this is the I've been doing this for 3 years now. So I've not been with any other client other than Nokia. So it's not completely indie, but on the way to it. Yeah. And yeah, I'm based in Finland right now at the moment, and I've lived in Finland for 11 years now. Yeah,
Wow.
and I'll pass it on to Drew.
Hi, I'm Drew. Um, I have a background in design and building websites, and uh, I'm not really making very much money right now. I'm mostly living off of savings, but when I do get the occasional gig here or there, it's usually in that space of building websites. And I'd really like to not do that anymore, or I don't know, figure out some way for it to be enjoyable. Maybe I just need to do more work. I don't know. Anyway, uh, I'll pass it along to, uh, I guess, Jordan.
Yeah.
You're in there?
Do you want to go last, Jordan?
Yeah, I'll go last.
Okay. Hi, I'm Kiran. I am pretty newly indie. Like I started maybe seriously thinking about this last year. The last job I worked was in, I would say, big tech. I was a TPM, so I worked on consumer electronics. And then I slowly, I kind of did this. I did a startup for a while with a friend. Uh, that didn't work out for me personally. It was like a huge investment of time, and I didn't have the energy, I think, to be a founder. Like that doesn't resonate particularly well with me. And then so I started working with a couple of clients unknowingly a few years ago, where they would approach me for a full-time job based on my previous job experience as a, project manager and or a product manager, and then I would convert that into like contracting gigs. So I'm more like, I guess, Anuraj in that way, where I haven't done like true consulting gigs, but I'm, more of a indie contractor. It works really well with my lifestyle because I think I have about 20% work, uh, but also kind of like Drew, I still burn some savings and I am working for another part. So it's not like it supports me 100%, but um, it's working pretty well right now where I feel like it's sustainable for at least a few years until I figure out what I want to do next. And I'm based, I have a lot of gravity towards the Seattle area because I lived there for a long time. So a lot of my connections and friends are there. But right now I'm in Antigua, Guatemala, trying to learn Spanish. So yeah, that's me. And I'll pass it around along to Rinku, who is a friend from Seattle also. And Rinku,
Hi,
let us know if,
everyone.
okay, yeah, we can hear you. Hi.
Yeah, I was just trying to unmute. Yes, so I used to actually work with Kieran. I have also been in big tech for several years. I left my job sometime end of last year, and I haven't really started doing consulting. I'm trying to figure out what I will do. So I decided to take this year a break to figure out, next steps. So I don't have any concrete plans. I just, kind of exploring. I just think like I don't want to work for a big company, kind of the usual stuff anymore. Maybe like have more freedom, so I'm trying to learn new things. It's been like so far really great. I'm not missing the usual work, but I do miss the problem solving part of it, but not the politics part of it. So it would be ideal, to find something different. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for giving me that orientedness. And yeah, I'm Jordan Peacock. As we were mentioning, I'm from Canada originally, currently living in Minnesota. And there was a prompt on social media a while ago, which was, what would you tell your 17-year-old self? And I thought about that. And I said, all your plans will fail. And what I meant by that was more along the lines of, if I had to predict in any given year what I would be doing 5 years from now, I would be wrong pretty much every time. Because life has just kind of taken all those zigs and zags. And I won't bore you by going too far back, but so much of the key moments for me were frankly kind of opportunistic. So much of my path has been maintaining a certain amount of peripheral sense awareness to what's going on around me and what opportunities are there. And most of the time, there's not going to be anything, and periodically you'll have that moment. So one example for me was the very first true contractor work I ever did was because I had decided to go to grad school. I didn't go to grad school for any career-oriented stuff. I did it because I audited a grad-level philosophy class on, who was it? Husserl, and loved it. And I'm like, this is the first time that I have ever felt like the academic work has really, really pushed and stretched me and forced me to really grow. And so I ultimately decided, hey, I'm gonna pursue grad school in philosophy. But when I moved to the States, none of my foreign credits were recognized, and so I didn't have a bachelor's either. And turns out grad schools want you to have a bachelor's. So I did a speed run of that using, there was a local college called Metropolitan State, and they had a first college program that was designed for people who had started college, but then, maybe they got married and had kids, maybe they got a career, and they were coming back to finish their degree. And so it had scaffolding in place for how to get life experience translated to credit, how to supplement practical experience with theory seminars. And you could also craft your own degree by basically pitching curricula to teachers outside of the program. And if they would sign off on it, you could do that. And so for me, it was a combination of I tested out of like 2.5 years worth of credits, and then I made my own degree program for most of the rest. And I basically did a 4-year degree in a 1.5 years. And some of it was, straight up like, hey, I'm going to pitch a JavaScript programming class, and then just submitting the stuff that I was doing for work. I was working for a software company at the time, and they'd be like, this is too much, this is too much, this is like a thesis project. It's like, well, I had to do it anyway, and I got paid for doing it, and I can submit it as homework, so it's win-win-win. But, in negotiating with my work, I'm like, hey, I would prefer either fewer hours or more flexible hours. So like 4 10s and then having like 1 day off, or shuffling the time around a little bit. And it was a small company; it was like 30 employees or something like that. But the woman in HR was just really rigid, really adamant that like, well, we absolutely can't do that, etc. And so I tendered my resignation. And then I came back to them and said, hey, I'm willing to work for you guys as a contractor. I gave myself a 30% raise and set my own hours, and then worked for them for another 1.5 years. And that was doable because this was a proprietary software company. They hadn't given me a raise. I was dramatically underpaid at the time. But it was, proprietary software on legacy environments like the IBM I series or AS400 or IBM I, depending on which era you know it from. And so it wasn't like they could just pick up somebody off the street and have them be useful. It took me about 6 months to get useful. And I knew this stuff pretty well at that point. And so it was like, well, I tried negotiating with you. That didn't work, so we're going to do this now instead. And that was really, it didn't really change materially any of the work that I was doing at the time, but it changed that, it gave me that freedom of how to manage my time that allowed me to basically, blitz that undergrad and then, do grad school. Then during grad school, one of the articles that Venkat wrote that was probably has impacted me the most in a material sense was he had a thing about, I'm trying to remember exactly. It was Forbes had this thing where like it wasn't really Forbes, but anyone who wanted to basically sign up and jump through a couple of hoops could write for Forbes, quote unquote, like a decade ago. And he had written a number of articles, including like Entrepreneurs Are the New Labor. We Are All Entrepreneurs Now, I think, was one of them. And then he also talked a bit about how, because of software kind of eating everything, one of the best ways to grow a career was basically to find a phenomenal developer that you could partner with, even if you weren't a developer. And at the time, my colleague at that company, who was working technical support with me, he was a rural Minnesota guy. He had an associate's in graphic design, but on the side, he'd been teaching himself C#. He was re-implementing rsync for fun and things like that, and just hands down one of the best developers I've ever met, but completely just coming from left field. He and I, while we were working for that company, and this I think was one of my professional high watermarks, we convinced the owner of the company and the head of development to completely throw out one of the owner's code for this product and allow us to completely rewrite it from the ground up. And we did so, and it was 100 times faster, it was more stable, it was cross-platform, and it really gave us the sense of, first of all, we can write enterprise-grade software, like architecture all the way through to, a couple years under our belt post-launch. But also how low the bar really was in enterprise software, and especially in the mid-market, like your slightly larger, above a mom-and-pop level, but, under 300 million, in that range. how poorly served they were by so much of the software industry. A lot of them, especially in the mid-market, they had the same needs as your Fortune 500 companies, but the solutions that were on offer that solved those problems, um, you know, they were like $500,000 to start and then go. And so we saw that space. And then the other two things, there was an enterprise workflow product that the company had tried to make. And the concept was really sound and there was demand for it. But the implementation of it, like this developer that built it, I think was one of the worst developers I've ever met in terms of just like usable code and design. And he'd been basically allowed to do whatever he wanted with this. And so when the company ended up getting acquired, my friend Caleb and I decided, hey, let's start our own thing and let's take some of these concepts and build that into a product. We can do services around that. And that was really the founding of becoming Machinix. And so we spent the next couple years, working day jobs and then working on product on nights and weekends. And end of 2016, we had our first beta client, our first launch. And for unrelated reasons, I ended up going full time end of 2016. So that's like the early stages of like how. So it was opportunistic for me to decide to negotiate to become a contractor, basically replacing my job as salaried with my job as contractor. It really just came down to, hey, I want more flexibility in my schedule, and they're being too rigid. It was fortuitous that I had met this guy, Caleb, and seen his skills. We had the opportunity to collaborate together, and we had the front row seats at our prior place of employment, where we'd been able to see hundreds of companies that fit the profiles that we knew we would have to sell into. So all of those, I think, were why when I came to starting our own company, going full time with it, on the one hand, it was terrifying, and my wife would tell you that like I'm far more risk tolerant than she is, but I actually think of myself as more conservative than the average entrepreneur with regards to risk, but it's calculated risk, right? It's in this case we were doing a product that we knew how to build because we had previously done products comparable to it in a market that we knew fairly well, with people that we knew on a first name basis, with a fellow entrepreneur that we had kind of gone through the 2008-2009 crunch, and we'd had kind of a suicide pact then where if one of us left the company, the other one would as well, because the two of us were holding up like 4 different departments. So all of that stuff basically gave us a huge amount of confidence to step out into somewhat unknown. A bunch of other stuff, but I'll stop there for a moment. Anything you want to comment, question on? Otherwise, I'll skip forward a little bit.
Well, I guess, well, one is kind of more tactical, which is it'd be interesting to hear you talk about how you were assessing good versus bad. Just, uh, I asked this kind of selfishly from like a TPM standpoint, where it's like being able to assess good and bad developers is very useful. But like it is a useful skill just to be able to assess people to work with as an indie. So it'd be kind of interesting to hear you talk about that.
Kiran,
And then also
what is the
kind of
full
like
form of TPM?
yeah, it's technical program manager. So it's like
Okay.
a little bit of product, a little bit of project management, a little bit of architecture. Yeah.
I think the things that really stood out to me with him was, first of all, it was clear that he understood things at a really deep level. So like the ArtSync project that was kind of a hobby thing that he was talking about, like, he understood how networking worked. It wasn't just, oh, I'm importing this library to work with this stuff. He had delved deep enough into how networking worked that he could speak to, okay, this is what's happening at the TCP layer, and this is what's happening. So there was that familiarity. We had similarly seen that, like we were, I think, the only two people there who had read like applied cryptography back in the day, and so having fairly deep sense of some of that, having a shared mindfulness around security, like out of the gate, like as a foundational part of development, and just also having like a curiousness. Like I remember I did a podcast episode with him when I had a podcast that lasted like 3.5 episodes or something like that. But one of them was with him in like 2011, and we were talking about neural networks and AI because I ended up doing my undergrad thesis on AI. And so, again, like, decade ahead of things in that sense. But then the big thing too was looking at what we developed in together. He was originally doing C# stuff. He ended up switching over to Java. I watched him learn Java. I watched him learn JavaScript. He ended up rewriting all my JavaScript because he's very opinionated and hates functional style programming and wanted the JavaScript style to be object oriented to move back and forth with the back end, and being able to have like quality arguments around some of that stuff where we could articulate, okay, this is why you care about this, and as long as I'm speaking to your issue, you're not hung up on like having a certain detail be a certain way. You're hung up on having like this core issue be addressed, and if the other person can demonstrate that they're addressing that, then you can move forward. And the other thing I think too is we have a very complementary. I'm good at details. I am very, very much not detail oriented. I'm the 30,000 foot view, synthesize data from vastly different domains, and I'm also very high executive, like just make the decision. Reduce the uncertainty as much as you can, and then act and move on. And a big part of that for me is like, if I don't do that, I have all these open tabs in my brain that just eventually end up having like the memory crash, right? But for him, sometimes he would just call me up and he'd be like, "Look, I've been researching these 2 libraries. These are the trade-offs here. These are the trade-offs there." And sometimes it would just be like, "Which set of trade-offs do you want to take?" And we talk about it for 5 minutes. I'm like, "Okay, we're gonna take the first one, and we're gonna accept these trade-offs." And we would just move on from that, where literally it was just talking things, using me to kind of bounce things off of, and then just agreeing that, hey, we're going to accept these trade-offs in what we do. So that's how that relationship kind of, where we got confidence in each other's ability to work and think through product and then the attendance services.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I've been like, because the follow-up to that is kind of, do you have a similar thought process around your clients? Or I guess now you've taken the business to actually sell to customers rather than, contracting or being a consultant for 1 or 2 companies at a time. So do you have like a similar process of like, hey, these people are more fun to serve, I will go and do that, rather than, maybe there's a bunch of unserious, or I'm using the word serious wrong, but just like a bunch of people that, would be great to serve, you get money, but it'll be a pain in the ass. So like, do you have some sort of heuristics for that, or have you had to
So
think about that?
we don't want banks as clients. Like that's a straight up. I will say never. Who knows? Like, this will bite me in the ass. But we never want to sell to banks. All through my professional life, the most hellish clients were always banks. They were differently hellish at different sizes, but that was one where just like, yes, our product would be useful there. Not touching that with a 10-foot pole. What do we kind of seek out with that? I think for me, what's most exciting is the weird niche use cases, which is bad for repeatability, and that is still a trap I'm trying to get out of. I'm very good at finding like super weird opportunities that are way out of left field that are great fits, but not very reproducible. I've been working with a sales guy the last few months to try to make some of the things more repeatable than they were. But a lot of our projects were very strange. And the common theme was really heterogeneous IT infrastructure. I've been using the term multi-generational to get at the sense of like, hey, maybe you have some cloud stuff, maybe you have some on-premise, Windows or Linux servers, maybe you have like a mainframe or a mid-range system that have been slowly, accreting over 1, 2, 3, 4 decades, and all of those are still in production to varying degrees. That's kind of our sweet spot, combined with when you have nothing that really fully crosses that span. Maybe you're using semi-overlapping tools, or you just have like people manually getting things from point A to point B, which I see all the time. So that's the spot where like I'm really excited about learning the industry, learning what makes this tech perversely specific. I was working with the Progress database earlier today for an old ERP system that I'd never heard of Progress before, but has been running on their Red Hat thing for like I don't know, 12 years, and great. All right, let's figure that out. So hopefully that answers that question somewhat.
Yeah, it does. It sounds like this airline I've been dealing with called Avianca needs some of your help, Jordan, because I canceled a flight months ago and they sent me a trip reminder now. So I feel like a couple databases aren't talking. But yeah.
Maybe just codes in mobile or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, a couple other not directly related to what I was talking about, but other parts of my life, because part of what we were talking about was how to balance, how to decide how much of your energy is getting pulled one direction or another. So for me, becoming mechanic is one pole. It's one leg of the stool, and I've got a number of other things going on. So in 2015, I presented at Refactor Camp in San Francisco with Randy, whose last name is escaping me right now. But I presented this. I made 500 plus Magic the Gathering cards based off of like technology and economics and philosophy and stuff like that. And then based off of that, I ended up in 2018 doing some consulting work for a think tank, and I did a card game for them for their workshops based off of one of their internal models they had done, and I formed Sortilage around that contracting relationship. So really, it was like game design as a hobby turned consultancy, and I did several other private client things. I worked on a couple projects, including I started working on a blockchain-based card game that I had to put on pause because of life stuff, and also like that required much more capital and time than I had to spend. But that's still kind of a latent idea. And I paused that consultancy during 2020, and then came back to it mid-2021 with the idea of doing some public-facing games. And so I have 3 role-playing game books forthcoming later this year, one of which I'll begin serializing on Sortilage.online next month, I believe. And we have like 1 book done, and 1 book is in editing, and the 3rd book is along the way being written. So I have those. I have 4 kids. Right now they are 15, 12, 7, and 5. They definitely take a certain amount of time and attention, and I try to be really jealous of my time as a father. So typically, like after I can pick up the kids from school until they're in bed is family time. A lot of my work happens either after 9 p.m. or early morning, basically. And then I moved to Minneapolis in 2018. Got remarried in 2019, but we'd moved in the year before and got really involved locally. And one of the things was I ended up joining the neighborhood association board. And this is a somewhat unique concept. Not a lot of cities have these, what I'm learning. But in Minneapolis, you have about 80 neighborhoods, and there's about 50 or 60 neighborhood associations, and these are not like homeowner associations. These are any resident, any business in that geographic location. If you're a resident, you can get nominated and get elected to the board. It's a democratic board. They have a whole process, and they have various histories. But I'm in one of the most populous neighborhoods, and it's pretty heavy renter. And I came in to like finish out somebody else's term, so it was only going to be like a 5-month term or something like that. But I came in like 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks before George Floyd was murdered, which happened just east of us, about 5-minute drive or something like that. So my first week and a half was basically standing up a Discord server for my neighbors to figure out which end was up, to help vet disinformation, to coordinate responses, and swap out who was keeping an eye on things overnight and whatnot. It was kind of wild, and I've since gotten more involved with that. So we just had our board elections last month, and we have our first new board meeting tomorrow. And we're like in a process right now of trying to buy a building and like turn it into a mixture of commercial and affordable housing and community space. We just got a huge county grant for a food share program that one of our residents started in 2020, and now it's like growing and it's spilling over into adjacent neighborhoods. And then I was in the news briefly this weekend because our local city DFL caucus was trying to endorse a city council candidate, and it ended abruptly when supporters for the other candidate kind of stormed the stage and shut the whole thing down. So those are some wild other things. But for me, the big stuff is really like these two companies, this nonprofit neighborhood association, and the kids and family are the big sources of where do I spend my time, where do I spend my effort, and which ones are dominant is kind of variable based off of the needs at the time. On the other hand, you have, and Kieran, you and I talked about this a little bit, but like I've been diagnosed with Crohn's since 2010, and my last surgery was in 2019. But like I'm still physically recovering in certain ways from that, even though I'm mostly stable now. I also got some diagnoses in 2021 that I was autistic, that I have inattentive ADHD, and bipolar 2. And that combination of things made a lot of sense for why I was so drawn to having agency and autonomy around my work, both in the sense of, physically I'd have days that are just bad days where it's like I'm just going to lay in bed all day and I'm not going to do anything. Chronic pain can really exhaust you. Maybe you only get two good hours in that day. But then the flip side of it's also true. I would joke that I would get my week's work done on Tuesday by like 11 a.m. And so then everything else that I got done that week was bonus, right? It doesn't quite work like that when you're self-employed because as soon as you're done the first set of work, then the next set of work just kind of shows up where you see it. But you get the sense. That's some broader context for folks, and I'm happy to talk about any element of that interests you, or some of the strategies that I've used to get out of my own way a little bit.
How do your clients find you, or like what is your lead generation mechanism? Is it just word of mouth?
It's mostly word of mouth. A lot of it is actually people that I work with referrals. And I do this the other way as well. Like I am very proactive about making referrals. If I'm encountering a situation where it's like, hey, I'm not the right fit, but this person is, or this person knows, I will always try to do that, and that gets reciprocated as well. or if you do a joint project with someone. So like I've done a bunch of information security work, but I'm not certified in any, like I haven't done any of the InfoSec certifications. But one of the guys that was at the same company that Caleb and I met at, he ended up starting his own consultancy for information security, and he has all the certifications. But he would pull me in on specific jobs. Where it's like, hey, can you handle this part, and so I would do some of those for him. And then later, another like a CISO for hire guy, I started working with him, and sometimes it was penetration testing, sometimes it was threat analysis, sometimes it was like reviewing contracts, like a paralegal for what are the regulatory compliance implications, what are the technological implications, and I was decent at all of that because I had the self-taught InfoSec stuff since going back to high school. But also I had the breadth of experience and that kind of interstitial placement where I'm really good at speaking between organizations, speaking between departments, speaking like the business jargon and the legal jargon and the technical jargon, and figuring out like where are the miscommunications happening. And so, I've done work through those, and then sometimes they come back around. Like right now I have a manufacturing client through that CISO for hire guy, where he reached out. He's like, okay, we've worked on some ransomware stuff together in the past. Here's the brief of what they're doing. Here's the needs. Here's how I see you fitting in. So yeah, I'm right now I'm hitting kind of a scaling issue where we started doing some aggressive sales more proactively, and while that hasn't been unsuccessful, it's been successful in ways we didn't want. So we're adjusting that.
So you are selling basically some software to ERP software. Did I understand incorrectly?
Yes, our main thing we have process automation platforms. So we have Peacock.io, and we have a tool called Nomad, which is an on-premise. And the way I sometimes describe it is it's the same Lego pieces, just arranged in different ways. So it feels like a tailored suit, but it's really just adjusted to fit, right? But from the end user perspective, like it looks, it's branded with the client's branding. It's just treated like an internal tool, basically, whether it's internal or not. Some of them are completely headless, and so it's just invisible to the end user. It's like, okay, things just get from point A to point B, and they don't have to worry about it. That's actually kind of the ideal thing. Like I've sometimes used the analogy that we're kind of like the contractors that will come in and like replace your lead pipe. The end result of it, like maybe we're adding a couple features, but mostly it's just like, hey, you have pipes that won't poison you and will last for the next decade and a half.
Hey, I was interested in when you have multiple sources of, energy, just multiple energy sinks, I guess. Um, and the priorities are changing week by week. Do you kind of have like, and I have a similar pattern of working where it feels like it's almost manic depressive, right? Like manic for parts of the week, and then just like I don't do much the other times. But like we always have external commitments, and it feels like I particularly feel scattered now. Do you have any thoughts on one, managing expectations, but two, managing your own self so that you're like, you know, um, you are putting your energy where you kind of think you should? Like, how do you kind of guide yourself through the week?
Yeah, I think there's a couple factors. For me, with the ADHD side in particular, the executive dysfunction is brutal sometimes, and so just like at the most severe, like just even writing an email can feel insurmountable. And ironically, I found the combination of delegation or partnering with other people, but also utilizing AI or other tools like that, super helpful. So, for example, one thing for me is I like to have everything in front of me so that I have like a whole vision of like what's going on, but that's also overwhelming. And so, for example, I use Notion for pretty much everything, but I have like a master to-do list in there, and then I have a view that is stuff from today, and I have a button that rolls up like anything from prior days that isn't done also like gets pulled into today. And then I can say if I have it broken into like urgent and important and neither. And that gives me a much more tractable list, while I'm also confident that I'm not losing anything, because that's my thing, is like if it's not written down somewhere, like it doesn't exist for me, and it's very easy for me to lose, to fail to do the thing. And so by having it there and having it where things show up when I need them, I can kind of trust in that process and not overwhelm myself. I do the same with my emails. I'm a zero inbox person, but I use the snooze feature all the time in Gmail, where it's like, hey, I don't need to act on this email today, but I do need to act on it on Friday. So I'll bump it to Friday. I'll act on it on Friday. So anything that is in my inbox after I do that sort of morning pass through is actionable today. So those are a couple of ways. One of the things that I've been dealing with right now, like I find it excruciatingly hard to write. And like I gave a conference presentation recently. I have another one coming up this week. What I've started doing with that is I'm very good at improvisational, extemporaneous speech. I am very bad at like sitting down and writing words and sentences. And so what I've started doing is just recording myself and generating a transcript, and then having that transcript get turned into prose or get turned into bullet points, which I then edit. So, that feedback loop helps get over the friction of the part that I find hardest, but gets me to a useful product at the end. And I think that's the key thing too, is give yourself permission, like keep doing a shittier job until you actually do the thing. Whatever the thing is that maybe you have like a psychological block around. Every time you face it, you're just like, I can't do it. For me, perfectionism tends to manifest as I can't do this as completely or as fully as I would want to, therefore I can't start. And giving myself ways to do like an initial layer that I can return to is huge. But also, hire out. Like, I hire a bookkeeper because fuck that.
Yeah, that's brilliant. One of the things you were talking about is an LLM in the middle of that whole like recording to transcription to prose piece, or like are you editing that? That sounded really interesting.
Yeah, I'm just using like OpenAI stuff for that. For the transcription I'm using, I have a Google Pixel, and it has a recorder app on it that does auto transcription. Then I'll just feed that into ChatGPT or similar and say, like, this is what I did for my so when I presented at the Minibar conference a couple weeks ago, my topic was the reasonableness of derelict software infrastructure, and literally I just turned on record, rambled at myself for 40 minutes or so, had that distilled into like 15 slides. I kept about 6 of them as is, and I, tweaked the rest. But that gave me enough of a structure that's like, okay, these are the beats, these are the things that I find important. I left some things out. But it's a way of getting over, where's the bottleneck for me? How do we get past that? So the more you learn about your own methods of working and the things that do and don't work, the more you're able to make little interventions like that. I think the other thing for me is like post-diagnosis, I started unwinding a bunch of things that were support structures that I had built into my life without knowing why I was building them, or even that I was building them, and then looking at them in retrospect and going, okay, some of these are serving, some of these are serving me well. Some of these aren't. And, that's reasonable because I had no idea what I was trying to solve for when I was, it was trial and error. It's like, okay, I can get by. But now looking back and going, okay, I now know what I need to solve for. So I've been kind of slowly going through and taking down some of those support strategies that I had fallen into and trying to like intentionally replace them to serve my own ends, my own values. But in the intermediary time, it's like you go from functioning to like, wow, I'm good at everything, to like, okay, I'm starting to find an alternative that's better, but you have to get through that trench first.
Yeah,
Any other
that helps a
questions
lot.
or comments? I'm going to have a hard stop in about 7 minutes here.
Yeah, I mean, one comment is just, it does feel like I have felt the time when it goes up again, and then it feels like I only get a good 1 or 2 weeks where I'm like, okay, this is working, and then I sometimes tear down systems too quickly. But yeah, that helps a lot. That's a really interesting way of looking at it.
Are all your like customers located in the same geography, or do you take like customers from around the world?
Deliberately, so we were deliberately remote only in 2016, especially because we were expecting to be international by default. We've only had a handful of non-U.S. customers so far, but there's nothing intrinsically preventing us from doing more. As well as the Twin Cities has a lot of corporate headquarters and is historically fairly supply constrained when it comes to technical talent. Plus, we're working with a lot of legacy and antiquated tech, so on a given job, we might need someone to pinch hit that knows like a very niche technology, and I don't really care where they're at or from. So it was a very intentional decision for us to be remote primary. We'll sell to whoever, we'll work with whoever. It was a few years, I think, before we had our first actual Minnesota client. Most of our clients were out of state or out of country for the first couple of years. And then, yeah, similarly with just, working with people, we'll work with the people for whom it gels and makes sense. And if they're in California or Berlin or Vancouver or whatever they ended up being, great. It does. There are some additional hoops you have to jump through sometimes, and there's taxes and other implications to consider. So make sure you have a decent accountant and or lawyer that you can bounce things off of. But that was a very intentional move on our end.
So I've generally seen people lean more towards like the founding side versus an indie consultant side, but it seems like you're able to balance both. Do you swing from one to the other, or are you basically now, full-time company indie, like you left the consulting work behind, or is it seems like your company also does enough niche things that it is a lot of one-offs. So I don't know.
So we're
What
trying.
way?
I think. Sorry, I'm trying
No, no, go ahead.
to. The sort of it is that I'm both doing more consulting than I would like and less.
Oh, okay.
More than I would like, I would love for Becoming Machinic to have like a healthy volume of, we have a half dozen or so of what I call ready-mades, which are basically processes that require very little services around them, and I'd love to have a sustainable sales process that just grinds those out. That's what we were attempting these past 6 months. That didn't work, so we're pivoting a little bit on that. I'm also I'm trying to make acquisitions fairly aggressively. I tried and failed to make an acquisition in January. I'm hoping to acquire 2 or 3 companies by the end of the year. Very, very, very small, old software companies, basically. So the hope is to basically have that, at least to a significant degree, be a product-driven company that has services. Right now, it's more of a services company that has products. So that's a, call it a 3-year plan, I guess. However, like for me personally, one of the things that I think I provide the most value for, but this isn't really something that I feel like I can turn into something economic, and like routinely at conferences, and especially in the startup and founder spaces and consultant spaces, like people will pose questions to me, and like we can have like a 10 to 30 minute conversation and get to like, okay, these are the things. And that's one of those things where I would love more opportunities to do that. I don't know that there's a way that I can get paid for that in a trivial sense. Maybe it's like a sponsorship or something, I don't know. But that's something where I feel like where have I provided the most value in the last year and a half? It's been little side conversations with people who are trying to cut their teeth on something, and just getting them past that next thing, or helping them realize an opportunity that's latent that they haven't seen. So I would love to do more of that, but I'd love the company to be more product focused. Cool. Well, I'm going to have to drop off here. Thank you. Oh, and you wanted me to mention this. So I'm heading into a class, effectively. I was selected for the Hennepin County CEO Now program, kind of like part MBA, part incubator, but not strictly for tech startups. And specific to entrepreneurs of a certain size within this county. So it's been a really interesting mix of folks. And since I didn't really come through the business school route, I've learned by trial and error a lot of the things, but it's fleshing out some of my understanding of some of the other business aspects in this. So that's where I'm going to head off to. But thank you so much for giving me this time, and I hope it was helpful.
Thanks, Jordan.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jordan, for coming by. And yeah, we usually meet on Wednesdays for the Indie Accelerator, but I think anywhere from Tuesday to Thursday should be pretty cool. But if anyone's catching the live stream later, feel free to join us. And Jordan as well, if you ever want to read the Art of Gig book very slowly, it'd be great to have you come by once in a while. But yeah, thank you so much.
Visiting the doctor during the exact same time, I will do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, thank you so much. It was really helpful, and I'm gonna have to unpack this. I'll probably have to give this whole talk another listen, so I can write a couple of these things down. But I'm definitely gonna try the LLM workflow where I just like stream of consciousness, say things, because yeah, writing is tough. But thanks everyone for joining too, and I'll see you next week.